I'd just come back from my doctor's appointment that morning. Melissa, my wife of 38 years, was standing in the kitchen with a smile stretched across her face, as if she had just made the best decision in the world. "I sold your old Cadillac for $40,000, she said, her voice so casual it hit me like a punch to the stomach. For a moment, everything went silent. My eyes locked on her, but the words I needed to say wouldn't come. My mouth was dry. I couldn't even swallow. The 1967 Cadillac Eldorado was more than just a car. It was my father's gift to me. It was everything he taught me about working with my hands, the weekends spent restoring it together. It was a part of my legacy. And here she was, announcing its sale like it was a worthless piece of junk. The family was gathered, smiling, laughing. My son Michael stepped forward, rubbing my shoulder in that way he always did when he thought he was comforting me. "You don't need that car anymore, Dad. It's just sitting there. You're not driving it. It's a waste." I felt like my chest was going to explode. I couldn't breathe. I felt nothing but a hollow ache where my heart used to be. Before I could respond, Melissa went on, her excitement growing. "We're going out to dinner tonight to celebrate." I was thinking the new steakhouse downtown. You know, the one with the $40 ribeyes. That's a smart financial decision, right? I closed my eyes. The emptiness of that garage, the oil stains still visible on the concrete floor from the last time I'd worked on the car, flooded my thoughts. This wasn't just about money. This wasn't about practicality. This was about respect, something my family had stopped giving me a long time ago. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from, because what I'm about to tell you is something I never imagined could happen to me. My wife sold my car, the one my father gave me, and it destroyed everything I believed about family. Now stay with me as I walk you through what happened next. I don't think I've ever felt more invisible in my life than I did that night. They celebrated like they'd just pulled off the greatest deal. My wife, Melissa, was already texting restaurant reservations, her voice filled with that fake excitement she always had when she made a decision she thought was smart. Michael and Jennifer sat across from me, all smiles, already planning how to spend the windfall from the sale. The money was the only thing they could see. But me, I felt like a ghost in my own home. I retreated to my recliner after dinner, the same chair I'd sat in for the last 5 years, the chair I'd been relegated to as my family's conversations became more about things I didn't care about and less about the man I used to be. The walls of this house felt suffocating. Every inch of it was a reminder of how little I mattered to the people I loved. I stared at the empty space where the Cadillac used to sit, the cold air creeping through the garage. I could almost hear my father's voice telling me to take care of the car, that it wasn't just a machine, it was a part of history. I wanted to scream, to tell them that they had just taken something that meant everything to me. But no one ever listened to me, not really. I thought back to the last time I worked on the Cadillac, the countless hours spent tweaking the engine, checking the fluids, taking her out for short drives on Sunday mornings. No one ever noticed. No one ever cared. Melissa used to say it was a hobby, that I spent too much time with that damn car, as if it were just some old toy I was obsessed with. What she didn't understand was that every time I opened that garage door, I was opening a door to the past, to my father, to memories that no one could take from me. But now that was gone, and I couldn't even grieve properly because my family treated me like I was overreacting. Michael and Jennifer didn't see the Cadillac as a legacy. To them, it was just a piece of old metal taking up space. And Melissa, she was already moving on to the next thing, her dinner reservation, her shopping list. They didn't get it. They didn't get me. The worst part was how they acted like everything was fine, like it was a done deal, like my opinion didn't matter. I looked around the room at their faces, Michael's, always looking for approval, Jennifer's, trying to be supportive but never really understanding, and I realized that it wasn't just the car they had stolen from me. It was my place in this family, my voice, and I couldn't take it anymore. I sat there, staring at the wall, my hands shaking, not from age but from the weight of betrayal. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit here and let them get away with this. I had to make them understand. I got up and walked to my study, pulling out the drawer where I kept all the documents on the Cadillac, the maintenance records, the letters from the museum, the photo of my father standing proudly next to the car the day he gave it to me. I couldn't just let it go. I wasn't going to. Not this time. I couldn't sleep that night. Not with the image of the empty garage haunting me. Not with the anger that kept bubbling up, tightening my chest. The next morning, I did what I've done my whole life when faced with something that didn't sit right. I started planning. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I didn't need their approval or their advice, especially not from Melissa, who already thought she had everything figured out. I knew the Cadillac's true worth, though. It wasn't just any old car, not even close. It was one of only 12 built with a special high-performance engine, a secret project by Cadillac in 1967. I knew this because my father, had worked on it. He had consulted for Cadillac, helped design and build parts that were still considered ahead of their time. This wasn't just a car, it was a piece of automotive history. I spent the next few days reaching out to people who would understand its value. Bill Patterson, the classic car dealer, was the first. I'd worked with him years ago, but now I needed him to confirm what I already knew. The phone rang and I picked up, trying to keep my voice steady. "Bill, it's Arthur Stevenson. I need to talk to you about something important." "Arthur, how's it going?" Bill asked, his usual easygoing tone in place. "Not great," I replied, "but I need you to help me verify something. The car I have, my '67 Cadillac Eldorado, it's not just a regular model, right?" Bill paused, and I could hear the wheels turning on the other end of the line. "Arthur, I know that car. Your father worked on it, right?" "Yeah," I said, feeling a surge of pride. "And it's one of the prototype models, isn't it?" "Absolutely," Bill replied. "That car's one of only 12 built with the high-performance engine. It's worth a lot more than $40,000. We're talking anywhere from $250,000 to $400,000 in the right market." I let that sink in. They had sold it for peanuts, completely unaware of its true value. The anger surged again, but I kept my voice calm. "I need you to help me, Bill. I need to prove this to them, to my family. I need to show them just how badly they've messed up." Bill agreed to help, but we both knew it wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about respect. I then made a call to a lawyer I'd worked with in the past, asking about the legal steps I could take to prevent the sale from going through. The Cadillac was part of my inheritance, and they couldn't just sell it without my consent. A few days later, I was armed with more than just my word. I had legal papers, photos, and a confirmation of the Cadillac's historical status. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I kept everything quiet. I wasn't ready to reveal my hand yet, but the more I uncovered, the more I realized that I was going to have to make them understand the gravity of what they'd done. This wasn't just about a car. It was about everything they'd taken from me. I knew I had to go public. I had to make them see that this wasn't a simple mistake. It was a betrayal. And if they didn't listen, if they didn't understand, I was going to show them exactly what it meant to ignore me. The days dragged on, but with each passing moment, my plan grew clearer. I'd been quietly collecting evidence, emails, documents, photographs, and speaking with experts. Bill Patterson, who had offered to help, became an unexpected ally in this crusade. I had the history, the records, and now I just needed the right moment to make them see what they had done. I started by recording a conversation with Melissa. She had no idea I was doing it. She never suspected that I'd be so meticulous, that I would keep track of every conversation, every small thing she said. I knew she thought she could dismiss me as just the old man who didn't matter, but now I was playing my cards carefully. One evening, while I sat in my recliner, trying to appear as if I wasn't paying attention, she started talking about the car again. "You know, Arthur," she said, standing by the kitchen counter, "that Cadillac was just a burden. I'm glad it's gone. We can finally move on." Her voice was light, almost dismissive, but I knew it wasn't just about the car. It was about everything. How she'd taken control of my life, my possessions, without a second thought. "I don't think you understand what you've done, Melissa," I said, my voice calm, but there was an edge to it. "Oh, stop it, Arthur," she shot back. "You've been holding on to that thing for years." What was the point? You haven't driven it in ages. It was taking up space. Now we can put that money to better use. I clenched my fists in my lap, feeling the anger rise in my chest. But I didn't let it show. Instead, I just nodded, maintaining my quiet exterior. You're wrong, I said. You don't know what you've sold. You don't know what you've taken from me. She didn't respond, but I could tell from the way she shifted on her feet that she was uncomfortable. She had no idea what she was dealing with. I had to keep my emotions in check. It wasn't enough to just lash out. I needed them to realize, slowly, methodically, how wrong they were. So, I made sure to gather everything I could. I called the Peterson Automotive Museum, confirming the car's registration as a historic vehicle. I spoke with car collectors who recognized the Cadillac's rarity and began documenting the value it could fetch at auction. I compiled everything into a folder. The photos, the papers, even a copy of the letter from the museum acknowledging the car's historical significance. I wasn't going to let them brush this under the rug. I had to get ready for the next phase. The time had come to make my family see that their actions weren't just careless, they were illegal. I'd already contacted a lawyer who could help me file for a civil claim, but I wasn't going to rush into anything. I knew that the courtroom was my final stage, my public showdown. But first, I had to push them to the point where they would be forced to confront their mistakes. The stakes were getting higher. The lies were stacking up. And when the truth came to light, there would be no way to ignore it. I was ready for what came next. The days seemed to stretch on forever, but I kept my cool. Melissa's celebrations of the sale became more frequent. I could hear her chatter on the phone with her friends about how they could finally take that vacation she'd been dreaming of, now that the Cadillac was gone. It was all so trivial to her: money, leisure, convenience. None of it mattered like it should. None of it accounted for what she had done. But I didn't show my cards, not yet. Instead, I did what I'd always done when I felt powerless. I let the silence grow between us. Michael kept checking in, trying to be the good son, asking how I was holding up, though his concern felt more like a duty than genuine care. He and Jennifer had spent the better part of their last visit telling me how much money I was saving without the Cadillac, how much better my life would be with a modern, reliable car. They didn't get it. They'd never get it. But what really set the tension in motion was the call I received from Detective Maria Santos. She had been investigating the car sale. The moment I heard her voice, my stomach dropped. But there was something strangely satisfying about knowing I wasn't the only one who saw this as more than a simple family dispute. "Mr. Stevenson," she said when I answered, "I'm calling about your Cadillac." "Is everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "The situation is a little more complicated than we thought," she replied. "We've uncovered some inconsistencies with the paperwork from the sale. We need to look into the title transfer." I could hardly keep the smile from my face. I knew the car had been sold under dubious circumstances. The signature on the title transfer was a forgery. But now, with Detective Santos involved, things were escalating, and I had the law on my side. As the days passed, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. My family was starting to feel the pressure. I could see it in their eyes when they glanced at me, especially when Michael tried to justify Melissa's actions. His excuses were weak, and the guilt was eating away at him piece by piece. "Dad, I just don't understand why you're making such a big deal out of this," he said one evening. "It's just a car. It's not like she's sold something irreplaceable." I didn't respond immediately. I didn't need to. "You're right," I said finally, my voice steady. "It's not just a car, but I guess you wouldn't understand what it means to me." That was the moment it really hit me. I realized just how far gone we were. I'd tried for years to get them to understand, but I'd never really gotten through to any of them. I was an afterthought in their world. But this time, they'd have to see it my way. The pieces were coming together. The tension was rising in every conversation, every glance. My family had crossed a line, and now the walls were closing in on them. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't even need their understanding. All I needed was the truth to be seen. The day of reckoning came sooner than I expected. It wasn't just about a car anymore. It had become about something far more important, my place in this family, my voice, and the respect I had been denied for years. The truth was finally starting to unfold, and there was no way my family was going to ignore it. It all started when the court hearing was scheduled. Melissa had no idea what was about to hit her. She thought she had everything under control. She probably thought that by sending Michael and Jennifer to smooth things over with me, she could keep everything quiet and manageable. But it was too late for that. I had already met with my lawyer and Detective Santos. Everything was in place. The documents, the photos, the evidence, everything I needed to make my case. The courtroom was filled with the usual crowd of people, waiting for their turn. But for me, it was different. This was the moment I'd been planning for. I'd carefully set the stage, and now it was time to expose the truth in front of everyone, especially my family. I sat in the back, waiting for the proceedings to begin, watching Melissa's face as she nervously shifted in her seat. Michael was next to her, pretending to be calm, but I could see the tension in his eyes. They knew they were losing control. They knew this was going to get ugly. When the judge finally called my case, I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel the weight of the years of frustration, the years of being disregarded by my own family. But this was my moment to take back what was mine, to show them all that I wasn't just some old man who could be pushed aside. The room grew silent as I walked to the stand. I could feel the eyes of the courtroom on me, but I didn't care. This was my truth, and I wasn't about to let it go unheard. The lawyer for the opposing side, a slick man who had been hired by Melissa, stood up and tried to assert his control. "Your Honor, we've already discussed this matter. There was no foul play in the sale of the Cadillac. The transaction was perfectly legal." I raised my hand to stop him. The judge gave me a nod, signaling me to speak. "I'm not here to argue over legality," I said, my voice steady. "I'm here to talk about something far more important than money or paperwork. I'm here to talk about respect." The room fell quiet as I spoke, every word carrying the weight of years of silence. I looked directly at Melissa and Michael, seeing their faces flush with discomfort. "The Cadillac," I continued, "wasn't just a car. It wasn't just a piece of property to be sold at will. It was my connection to my father, my history, my legacy. It meant more to me than any amount of money you could ever make from it." Melissa shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting away from mine. Michael didn't meet my gaze. Jennifer's face, however, was hard to read, but I saw the doubt creeping in. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the folder I had carefully prepared, the documents, the photographs, the maintenance records, and the letter from the Peterson Automotive Museum confirming the car's historical value. I handed them to the judge. "These," I said, "are the documents that prove the true value of the Cadillac. This wasn't just some old car that I didn't need anymore. This car is a rare piece of automotive history, and my wife sold it without even asking me, without understanding what it truly meant to me." I paused, letting the words sink in. The room was still. The judge took the documents and flipped through them, nodding as he absorbed the information. He looked up at Melissa, then at me, and finally spoke. "Mrs. Stevenson," the judge said, his voice firm, "I believe we have a serious issue here. It seems there has been some lack of transparency in this matter, and I would like to take a deeper look at the circumstances surrounding this sale." Melissa's face turned pale. She tried to say something, but the words caught in her throat. The detective, Maria Santos, stood up and approached the bench, holding a folder of her own. "Your Honor, there's more. After further investigation, we've uncovered that the signature on the title transfer was forged. The paperwork filed with the DMV doesn't match the signature on Mr. Stevenson's driver's license." The courtroom went dead silent. I could see the color drain from Melissa's face. Her eyes went wide, and I felt a surge of vindication. This wasn't just about a car anymore. It was about everything I had been fighting for. The judge looked at Melissa. "Mrs. Stevenson, it appears you may be facing some serious charges here." I felt a strange satisfaction in hearing those words. Not because I wanted to see Melissa punished, but because, for once, I wasn't the one who had to keep quiet. This is not just a simple matter of family disagreement, I said, my voice now loud enough for everyone to hear. This is about taking something that didn't belong to you. This is about dishonesty, disrespect, and a blatant disregard for what matters to me. The judge turned to me, his gaze softer now. We'll be investigating this further. But Mr. Stevenson, I believe you've made your point. The room was still. But in that silence, I could feel the weight of the years of neglect, the years of being dismissed as irrelevant, lifting. The courtroom was charged with a quiet tension after the hearing. Melissa, Michael, and Jennifer were still trying to come to terms with what had just happened. I could see the doubt creeping into their expressions now, doubt about what they had done and about how they had treated me all these years. When we walked out of the courtroom, the air felt heavier. Melissa was silent, her face pale. She had been through enough to know that this wasn't going to end well for her. Michael walked beside her, trying to comfort her, but I could see the cracks beginning to show. There was no hiding from the truth now. As we got to the parking lot, Michael turned to me, his voice tight. "Dad, can we talk for a minute?" I nodded, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. I wasn't sure what he was going to say, but I knew it wasn't going to be an apology. Not yet. "Look, Michael started, but then paused, clearly struggling to find the right words. "I just want to say, I'm sorry for how things went down. I didn't know the car meant that much to you. I thought it was just a car." I looked at him, the weight of his words almost making me laugh, but there was no humor in it. "You thought it was just a car," I said, my voice low. "That's exactly what you all think. You never understood what it meant to me, what it meant to my father." Michael shifted uncomfortably. "We didn't mean to hurt you, Dad. We were just trying to help, to make things easier." I couldn't help but scoff. "Help? You sold my car behind my back and then spent the money without even asking me. That's not helping. That's controlling. You've been treating me like I don't matter, like I'm some kind of burden you need to manage." I paused, trying to collect myself. "You know, I spent years trying to teach you and your mother about things that were important to me. I tried to share my passions, my memories, but you all just ignored me. Now you've stolen something from me, something that meant everything." Michael looked down, his face flushed with guilt. "I didn't know. I didn't realize." "No," I said firmly. "You didn't. And that's the problem. You never really listened. You never really cared." We stood in silence for a long moment before he spoke again. "Mum's scared, Dad. She doesn't know what's going to happen. The police, they're looking at her for forgery. This could ruin everything." "Good," I said, my voice steady, but inside the satisfaction was bittersweet. "She needs to face the consequences. She needs to understand what she did." I watched Michael nod, but there was no relief in his face. He wasn't looking at me like he had before, not with the same sense of comfort or authority. Now I could see the cracks in the facade. Now he was beginning to understand that his mother's actions had consequences, that the walls she'd built around us were about to come crashing down. The next few days were a blur. Detective Santos kept me updated, but it became clear that things were spiraling for Melissa. The investigation into the forgeries, the illegal sale, it was all coming to light. I wasn't the only one who had been betrayed. Michael called again the following day, his voice different. "Dad, we need to talk. It's about Mom. She's not doing well. She's really upset. I'm worried about her." I let out a slow breath. "I'm sure she's upset, Michael. She sold my car without my permission. She betrayed me, and now she has to face what she did. That's the reality." "I know, but this isn't just about the car anymore," he said. "It's about everything. Mom's been making all the decisions, and we never listened to you. We just assumed you wouldn't care." "Exactly," I said. "You assumed I didn't care, that everything I did was irrelevant, and now you're all realizing how much you were wrong." There was a long silence before Michael spoke again. "I don't know what to do anymore, Dad. I want to make this right. I just don't know how." "You start by being honest, Michael," I replied. "You start by acknowledging what's been happening. And then, maybe, you can earn back some respect." The following week, the charges against Melissa were made official. She was facing not just the forgery charges, but potential financial penalties. It wasn't just the Cadillac that was in jeopardy. It was everything she had done to manipulate, control, and dismiss me. But as much as I hated to see it, this wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. Justice for my father's legacy. Justice for me. And as the family fractured around me, as they finally saw the consequences of their actions, I stood firm. I wasn't going to be the one to clean up their mess anymore. The days that followed were filled with discussions and meetings with lawyers. Michael tried to make things better, but the damage had been done. There was no going back, at least not for Melissa. The final blow came a few days later when the police returned the Cadillac to me. It was parked in my driveway, under the cold morning light, like a long-lost friend finally returned home. The car had been through so much in such a short time, taken from me, sold, nearly lost. But now it was back. I stood there for a moment, taking it all in. The shiny blue paint, the gleam of the chrome trim. It was the same car, but somehow it felt different now. This time I wasn't the one who had to fight for it. The court proceedings had been tough, and the weeks of uncertainty had left me worn out. But in that moment, standing next to the car, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. I ran my hand along the hood, tracing the curves like I used to with my father. The weight of what had happened wasn't gone, but it felt less heavy now. The car wasn't just a connection to my past. It was a symbol of my fight to reclaim my voice. To remind myself that I wasn't invisible. I could hear the faint sound of Melissa's voice in my head, saying that the car was just a thing, that it didn't matter. But it did matter. It mattered because it was mine, and they had taken it without a second thought. But I had gotten it back. And in doing so, I had gotten something else back too, my dignity. The phone rang. I picked it up, knowing exactly who it was. "Arthur, I just wanted to let you know that we've completed our investigation," Detective Santos said, her voice calm but steady. "The charges against Mrs. Stevenson have been filed. She'll be facing a court hearing soon." I sighed, staring at the Cadillac. "I appreciate everything you've done, Detective, but honestly, I just want this over with. I just want to move on." "You will," she assured me. "But you also deserve to be heard, Arthur. This is your moment, and you've got the justice you were looking for." For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of finality. The justice was there, not just in the legal sense, but in a deeper, more personal way. It was the kind of justice that didn't come from punishment or retribution. It came from standing firm, from reclaiming something that was rightfully mine. As I hung up the phone, I felt the weight lift a little more. I was no longer the man who was pushed aside. I was no longer the invisible father or husband who had to beg for respect. I had earned it the hard way. I thought about Melissa, her face pale in that courtroom, realizing that her actions had consequences. I wasn't going to forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But what mattered now was that she understood the cost of her choices. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was finally standing on my own. The Cadillac, parked in my driveway, was more than just a car. It was a reminder that some things, no matter how much time passes, are worth fighting for. And in the end, justice wasn't about making her pay. It was about me standing up for myself, taking back what was mine. I had won, but the battle for my peace was far from over. In the weeks that followed, life started to settle into a new rhythm. The Cadillac was parked in my garage, just where it belonged. I spent more time with it than I had in years, not to restore it, but to simply appreciate it for what it was, a connection to my father and a symbol of everything I had fought for. I'd been living with so much anger, so much resentment for what had happened, but something had shifted in me. The battle for justice was over. Melissa was dealing with the consequences of her actions, but I wasn't looking for revenge anymore. I had gotten what I needed: respect. I thought back on everything that had led to this moment, the endless years of being ignored, dismissed, and treated like an afterthought by my own family. I had spent so much time trying to explain my interests, my history, but it never seemed to matter to them. They had never truly seen me for who I was, but now they had no choice. And for the first time I realized something that I should have known all along. Their actions didn't define me. I used to think that my family's approval was the most important thing. I used to think that if I just kept trying, if I just kept explaining myself, they would come around. But now I knew that I didn't need their approval. I didn't need them to validate me or my choices. I had been fighting for my voice, for my place in this world, and now I had it back. I couldn't change the past. I couldn't erase the hurt or the betrayal, but I could control how I moved forward. I thought about the future, about what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I wasn't done yet. There was more for me to accomplish, more to share. The car was just one chapter. There was still so much left to write. As I sat in the garage that evening, the hum of the Cadillac's engine still echoing in my mind, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. It wasn't the peace that came from everything being okay, because not everything was okay. Melissa and I were still miles apart, and the family dynamic had changed irreparably, but I had peace in knowing that I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my place in the world. The car wasn't just a link to my past. It was a reminder that I could still fight for what mattered to me, that I could still stand up and be heard. Maybe that's the real lesson here. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight for ourselves. And sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating others, but from simply taking back what's ours. I wasn't sure where my relationship with my family would go from here. I wasn't sure if I could ever forgive Melissa for what she had done, but I knew one thing for sure: I was done living for their approval. The road ahead was mine to decide. Weeks had passed since the courtroom confrontation, and things between me and my family were quiet, too quiet. I had gotten my Cadillac back, but there was still an empty space between us that couldn't be filled with any amount of money or apologies. I couldn't ignore it anymore, the fact that I had spent decades fighting to be heard and still felt so alone. The house was too quiet. Melissa was gone, staying at her sister's place for now, and Michael, despite his attempts to reach out, seemed to be walking on eggshells around me. It wasn't the same. It couldn't be. I spent my days tinkering in the garage with the Cadillac, just like I always did. But this time it wasn't just about the car. It was about reclaiming my space, my peace. I could hear the hum of the engine, feel the weight of every part as I worked. But there was a hollowness in the work now. I wasn't doing it for anyone else anymore. It was for me, and it felt like the only thing in my life I had control over. But it wasn't just about the car. The days were starting to blur together, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still standing in the ruins of my family. I hadn't seen Jennifer or the kids in weeks. Michael called every so often, trying to make amends, but the distance between us had grown so wide, I wasn't sure how to close it. The truth was, I didn't know if I wanted to. I had spent my entire life trying to make my family understand me, trying to show them that I wasn't just some old man stuck in the past. But the truth had always been that they didn't get it. They didn't care about what mattered to me. I didn't want to be a burden to them anymore. I realized, sitting there in the silence of my garage, that the real reason I had fought so hard for the Cadillac wasn't just for the memories or for the history. It was because I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't invisible, that I still mattered. But now I was starting to see the truth of it. Maybe I didn't need them to see me. Maybe it was enough to see myself. So I made a decision. I packed a few things, nothing too big, just the essentials. The Cadillac, my tools, and the letters and photographs that had been passed down through the years. I was going to start over. This house, with its quiet walls and empty spaces, was no longer my home. I didn't tell anyone. I couldn't. It wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. The next morning, I drove the Cadillac down the highway, feeling the weight of the past lift with every mile. The road was wide open in front of me, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running away. I was running towards something new. I didn't know exactly what the future held, but I was ready to face it on my own terms. I never thought it would end this way, not after everything I'd been through. But life has a way of surprising you, especially when you least expect it. 3 months after I left the house, I found myself standing at the entrance of a classic car meet in Los Angeles. The air was thick with excitement, the roar of engines, the sound of tires scraping against pavement. A crowd had gathered, admiring the vintage cars lined up for display. But my eyes were locked on one car, the Cadillac. It was mine. I had made my peace with everything that had happened. The divorce was finalized. Melissa kept the house, the assets, and everything else that came with it. I left with the Cadillac, my remaining tools, and something far more valuable, my dignity. But as I walked through the event, surrounded by people who actually appreciated the Cadillac's value, who understood the history, the craftsmanship, and the legacy, it dawned on me how little my family ever truly understood me. I had spent years trying to share my passions with them, trying to make them see the value of what I cared about, but they never did. Now here I was, standing with a group of car enthusiasts who treated me like an expert. They didn't see me as an old man stuck in the past. They saw me as someone with knowledge, someone whose opinions mattered. It felt good. For the first time in a long time, I was in a place where I belonged. I didn't know what I expected from my family, but I certainly never expected this level of respect. I was getting it from strangers, people who understood. I felt a strange sense of pride, but also a sadness I couldn't shake. Why had I waited so long for my own family to give me this? As I chatted with a few collectors, exchanging stories about car restoration and the unique history of the Cadillac, I received a call. Michael's name flashed on my phone. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Dad," he said, his voice soft as if he wasn't sure how to start. "Yeah?" I replied, looking at the Cadillac gleaming in the sunlight. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," he began. "About how we never really listened to you. And I want to make it right. I've been talking to Jennifer and we want to fix things. We want to buy back the tools we sold. We're sorry, Dad. We want to show you that we understand now." I could feel the weight of his words, but there was a part of me that wasn't moved. It wasn't about the tools or the money anymore. It wasn't even about the Cadillac. It was about respect, and I wasn't sure that buying back some things would ever make up for the years of silence. "I appreciate that, Michael," I said, my voice steady. "But it's not about the tools or the car. It's about understanding. And that's something that can't be fixed with money." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Dad, we've messed up. We've treated you like you were just a problem to solve, not a person to respect." "Yeah," I said quietly, "but you can't fix that with money. And you can't fix it with grand gestures. It's something that takes time. It takes real change." I hung up the phone and looked back at the Cadillac parked proudly at the meet, the sun reflecting off its polished surface. For a moment I felt a twinge of regret. What if things had been different? What if they had understood me? What if I had spoken up sooner? But then I remembered the truth. I didn't need them to understand anymore. I had my own community now. People who saw the value in what I had to offer, who respected me not just for the car, but for the years of knowledge, of memories, and of passion that came with it. That was enough. I could let go. I wasn't waiting for their approval anymore. I was carving out my own place in the world. And that, in the end, was the real victory. Because sometimes the irony of life is that the ones who truly get you aren't the ones who share your blood. They're the ones who share your passion. As I stood there, watching the people gathered around the Cadillac, admiring its polished chrome and sleek design, something hit me like a wave. I had spent my life working on this car, pouring my heart and soul into restoring it with my father. The engine roared to life as I took it for a spin down the street earlier that morning, and for a brief moment I felt the past and present collide. The memories of my father's hands on the wheel, guiding me, teaching me everything he knew about cars, about life, flooded back. But now it was just me. I leaned against the Cadillac, running my fingers along the door handle, tracing the familiar marks left by years of care. I thought about how much of my life had been spent maintaining it, how the car had become my way of holding on to the past, a piece of history that was just mine. Melissa and the kids had never understood that. They had seen it as a burden, something to be discarded in favor of their idea of convenience and modernity. But here, among strangers who shared my appreciation for this vintage beauty, I realized something profound. It wasn't just the car that was important to me. It was the connection to a time and place that no one could take away. These people, strangers, had found value in the things I had always valued. They didn't see me as just an old man holding on to nostalgia. They respected me for what I knew, what I had built, and what I still had to offer. That respect was a different kind of currency, one that could never be stolen. It was funny in a way. I had been searching for approval from the people who should have understood me the most, my family. I thought that if I could just explain myself one more time, if I could just make them see the value of what I cared about, they'd come around. But the more I tried, the more I was ignored, the more I was silenced. Now I was surrounded by people who didn't need explanations. They just got it, and that was enough for me. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Michael again. I stared at the screen for a long moment, unsure whether to pick up. In the end, I answered, knowing full well that this conversation wouldn't change anything, but maybe it would bring some closure for both of us. Dad? Michael's voice cracked, a mix of guilt and something else, remorse, perhaps. I just wanted to say that I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how we didn't understand, and how I didn't listen. I'm sorry for all of it. His words hit harder than I expected. Part of me wanted to just hang up, to let him stew in his guilt. But another part of me, maybe the father in me, the part that still hoped, wanted to hear more. I know you are, Michael. And I know you think that apologizing will fix things, but it won't, not overnight. I can't just forget how many times I was ignored, how many times you all just dismissed me. There was a pause. Then in the smallest, most vulnerable voice I had heard from him in years, Michael spoke. I don't expect you to forgive me, Dad. I just want you to know that I see it now. I see what I missed, what we all missed, and that was it. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't try to make excuses. He just admitted what had been true all along, that they hadn't truly seen me, that maybe they never would. But at least for the first time he saw it. I wasn't invisible anymore. I let out a deep breath, holding the phone tightly in my hand. It's not about the Cadillac, Michael. It's about respect. It's about seeing me for who I am, not who you want me to be. I know, Dad. I'm sorry, he repeated. I know you are, I said softly, finally feeling a sense of peace I hadn't known was possible. But I can't keep doing this. I can't keep fighting for your approval. I have to live for myself now. The silence on the other end was thick, but I didn't mind. I wasn't looking for closure from him. The closure I needed came when I realized I didn't need them to understand. I didn't need their validation to know that I was worth something. I was enough as I was. The conversation ended with a few more apologies, but I was already looking ahead. The world was full of people who understood me. I had a whole new chapter to write, one where I wasn't constantly fighting for respect or approval. As I drove the Cadillac through the winding streets of Los Angeles, the sunset casting long shadows across the road, I realized that this journey was far from over. It wasn't about what had been taken from me. It was about what I was going to do with what I had left. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally on the right road. Sometimes the world doesn't give you what you think you need, but sometimes it gives you something better. And now I was free to drive forward without looking back.